A huge part of my research process when it comes to getting this podcast ready is looking at what the most commonly asked questions are for newer and not so new writers. I have writers messaging me on my TikTok or on my Instagram or emailing me from my website or even booking a 15-minute call asking me for those things that are really bothering them about writing a book, because one of the huge tenets of my writing coaching is that information block is one of the most insidious versions of writer's block. Information block is when you don't know a key piece of advice, and maybe you don't even know where to find out that piece of advice, which is even more stressful. And then that actually really negatively impacts you when it comes to writing your book, because you just can't figure out how to do one element. And for many people, this sort of thing will hold them back. For many people, it'll be that they don't know how part of the publishing process works, or maybe they don't know about punctuation, or maybe they don't know about how you upload a book to Amazon KDP or something like that. We'll be talking about a bunch of those things in future episodes. But one of the things they don't know is really kind of that overarching process of how to write and publish a book, and they don't know how long it's going to take. And I think it's really important to know how long that's going to take, because there's several reasons, in fact, why that's going to be, but it really helps you to plan. It helps you to keep on track. It keeps so many things going if you know how long it's supposed to take. So I'm going to front load this right now, and I'm going to tell you that the average time it takes to write a book is 6 months, which isn't saying very much, really, because lots of people write either terrible books in much less time. Some people manage to write pretty good books in much less time, and some authors take much, much longer. But then there's the question of how long is too long, right? That's a really valid question as well. So in this episode, we're going to be talking all about that process of writing a book, how long it takes, and how you can actually make your time writing a book more efficient, how you can be more productive, how you can see whether you are actually taking too long or not long enough. We're going to be hearing about authors who took a super short time, how they did it, how being prolific may be the key to financial success, but also why taking your time might be the answer. So whether you're a slow writer or a fast writer, this episode is not going to make you feel bad. It's actually going to make you feel like, I have some more choices and I have some more tools that are going to help me to get this thing done. So we'll talk about those great secret tools I use to help my clients to write a good book fast. You're going to be getting a little preview of the content that's going to be in my course From Idea to Published in 6 months, which I have a little subtitle for that course, which is or more, because sometimes it just takes longer. But we're going to be talking about something crucial, which is how writers shortchange themselves by underestimating how long it's going to take them to write. Because writing content is just one part of the equation. So we'll be talking about that today. But definitely the most important thing is how to get time on your side when it comes to writing and publishing a book. We don't want you to get tripped up. We don't want to make you waste time. We want you to be just this amazing, productive writing machine, writing these really great things. But of course, we want to leave room for inspiration and dreaming along the way. So thank you for joining me. Let's get started. If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karenna Akavane, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation. Thank you so much for joining me on the How to Be an Author podcast. Let's talk about how long it takes to write a book. And let me first tell you my journey into being an author who actually writes books under her own name and dares to talk about it and promote those books and everything. It took a really, really long time. And full disclosure, I know I could still be better at it. I'm still dabbling in pen names. I'm still doing a lot of editing and ghostwriting stuff and writing other stuff under names that are not my own. And that might set me back a lot. But really, those are things I do that I kind of enjoy. But it did take advertising myself as a writing coach to finally do as I say and step it up a little bit. So I'm now on my second book that's going to be coming out under my name. And I find that pretty exciting. And along the way of doing those 2 books in 3 years, I've figured out how long it actually does take. And also I figured out the things that have made it that I am a little slower than maybe I could have been. But as I was saying, I do a lot of other things on the side that are writing related or completely writing attached. And so for me, it's not realistic to do a book every 6 months, though as time goes by, I might actually be able to step it up to that. And I think that there is such a thing as like a warming up system where when you've kind of found your genre that you write in, you come up with a formula that might help you to start writing faster. It's normal for your first few books, especially under your own name, to take a longer time. When I'm ghostwriting something for someone, I think the 6 months is the max because I just start from an outline and I have the structure and I know what I want to say for them and there's no ego tied up in it. So that's an interesting little nugget that I've taken away from this, which is sometimes our ego will trip us up and we want to be perfect if it's under us. And that totally makes sense. So let's look at a few famous writers, how long it takes them to write a book. Stephen King takes a few months on average. He's famously said that a rough draft shouldn't take you more than 3 months ever. I tend to agree with that idea of trying to do a rough draft faster because a rough draft doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be long. And that's why I think that things like NaNoWriMo can be a big help to writers who are trying to write a book faster. I have made a few videos about how you create a rough draft in a month, and that's something that I share in my course. But Stephen King's absolutely right. If you create an outline and you have your idea of what you want to do, you can create a crappy rough draft in a month or 3 and then polish that into a book. Now, John Boyne, the guy who wrote The Boy in Striped Pajamas, apparently took 3 days to write his book. That's pretty extreme. I think he probably wrote it pretty much a little bit stream of consciousness that he had this storyline that was pretty simple, but I'm pretty blown away that it took 3 days to write, and I don't know how that happened. It wouldn't work for me, but that's very, very cool. I would love to look into that process. Stephenie Meyer is kind of in that Stephen King school of storytelling where it took her 3 months to write Twilight. Okay, here's my opinion about Twilight, though. It's that there's not that much going on, really. Twilight's a very simple storyline. And this is where some of you do get tripped up. And so I'm going to interrupt my rundown of authors and how long it took them to write things. If you look at Twilight, there are very few plot points. And then there's a lot of description around each of the short number of plot points. So I get it that it took 3 months to write. She probably created a really simple outline and then broke it down and then just blasted through that scene by scene. Writing scene by scene is another one of those tricks that you can use to write a lot faster, but we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the podcast. Jane Austen is more average. She took 10 months to write Pride and Prejudice, which makes sense. But F. Scott Fitzgerald took 2.5 years to write The Great Gatsby. And I find that very interesting because The Great Gatsby is not a super long book. So you see that the length of the book doesn't always impact the length of writing. So when I was looking up this episode, so many people say, okay, well, if you want to know how long it's going to take you to write, you need to look at how long your book's going to be and then divide the number of pages by time. I'm like, that's not how it works. I honestly think that you're completely shortchanging yourself if you're just using this as an equation with page numbers. I think F. Scott Fitzgerald really needed to get into that world of The Great Gatsby that he was writing, so I'm not surprised it took that long to write, especially if you're not living in that world that The Great Gatsby happens in. Now, Gillian Flynn took 3 years to write Gone Girl. Again, there's such a great twist in Gone Girl, and it works so well. I'm not surprised it took her that time. And also, I'm assuming she had some fits and starts. Like, she had this story she wanted to write, and she's trying to figure out, how do I best reveal this twist? That's fair, too. My current work in progress has 2 storylines that go parallel, but it took me a while to try to fit them in like a little puzzle to make them work together. And I think that's half of the thing that took me longer with this book is that I needed to weave in the 2 storylines. So I'm going to say that if you got a couple storylines or a couple points of view, it might take you longer. Margaret Mitchell took 10 years to write Gone with the Wind. And that's a pretty interesting number because if you look at Margaret Mitchell, well, where are Margaret Mitchell's other books? Donna Tartt also on average takes about 10 years to write a book. And you see that she's not super prolific, obviously, because, how many years does she have in her life? But you start to wonder, is it worth it? Is this what I want for myself to take 10 years to write one book and then maybe not to have another book in me? Right? That's one of the reasons why how long it's going to take you to write your book why that matters. I think that being realistic about how long you want to spend or how long it's going to take you is one of those crucial things. So making a plan for not only the writing process and the content creation process, but the editing process, the publishing process, or if you're going to be publishing conventionally, the querying process, knowing what to expect is going to keep you on track. Because I know so many writers who don't know what to expect. They think it's going to take them a certain amount of time. They forget some of the tasks that they have to do, and then they get burned out from doing anything because they think, well, I thought that the 6 months I spent on writing my book is all I needed to do, and I didn't plan for the rest of it, and now I just don't have any time in my life to be doing this thing, right? I think that's really important because we all have busy lives, but many of us set aside a lot of tasks or other priorities in order to write a book, and realistically, it's hard for us to kind of do that suspension of our normal schedule in our lives for a really long time until we decide we're going to become full-time writers. But I think being realistic is crucial. And don't be asking how long it's going to take because you want to trim it down to the strict minimum. I know a lot of writers who do this as well, where they're like, okay, you say 6 months, great. Okay, well, I'm going to do it a little bit faster. Those other people are slow. I'm going to take these shortcuts. Shortcuts are smart if they're smart, but if they're not the shortcuts that are appropriate to what you're doing, then you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. It's crucial to remember that sometimes when you're taking a shortcut, you're going to be giving up something. In fact, most of the times you're giving up something. Taking a shortcut often means not taking the scenic route, right? So if you're taking a shortcut, maybe you're not getting that whole experience of writing the book and diving into your characters and exploring the world. And all of that depends on your goals. Some people just want to get the story out, and some people want it to be all beautiful and poetic, everything else. So again, make peace with the fact that you are writing the book that you are writing, and know that maybe the book you're writing is going to take you longer or less long than somebody else, and that's fine too. And all of this is why in my upcoming course, From Idea to Publish in 6 Months, I add that cheeky little side note to the title or more, because sometimes it does take longer. It just does for some good reasons. But also I'm going to say that keeping on track is good. Why is keeping on track good? I mentioned that we plan things. We plan our schedule. We need to plan other projects. And it's good to know when things are going to be popping up and to fit it into our world without burning out or being frustrated or thinking, wow, writing this book ruined my relationships, ruined my career, ruined everything else because I didn't plan for it. Another thing is that momentum is excellent. And that's why sometimes I feel pretty frustrated that it takes me longer to write my things because I'm doing other books under other names or I'm helping clients. I love doing that stuff, but sometimes it's frustrating to lose that momentum. And so when you hear people say write every day, I don't go that extreme with write every day, but I do think write often because momentum is one of the best tools you have to keeping on track. I also think that writing a book in a time that's pretty self-contained and that's, on track and faster, it helps your mindset because honestly, if you're slogging through and there's no end in sight, your mindset gets pretty impacted. Believe me. I know a lot of people are like, I'm never going to be done with this. This is horrible because this is the rest of my life, writing this one book. And I don't want anyone to feel like that. It's really hard to maintain a positive mindset, especially when you're doing something like a book that has such an uncertain outcome. That's the thing. You don't know how your book's going to do. So how do you maintain that positive mindset, especially if you're taking longer than you thought? It's pretty hard. So how do we do this writing faster thing? Right? Remember that no two writers are alike, but how do we do this writing faster thing if it's something that's going to help you? I mentioned NaNoWriMo, and I thought that was pretty cool because it's easy-ish for a lot of people to say, okay, you know what? I can take 1 month to really put my schedule in a way that is completely centered around writing. So NaNoWriMo teaches us that when we have more writing time, more time to write, more focus on writing, we get a lot done. Now, is it easy to maintain that NaNoWriMo rhythm all year round? No. That's why we stick it to a month. And that's where I think, listen to Stephen King, that fast, rough draft. Do a NaNoWriMo rough draft. That can really, really get you started because once you have that critical mass behind you, once you have 50,000 words or 90,000 words, even if it's junk, you've at least got something to work with. And I think that really, really helps. Another way to write faster is give yourself a deadline. So again, whether it's the month of NaNoWriMo or whether you say, okay, I'm going to have this much done by X time, I think deadlines work really, really well, especially when you're coming up with a deadline that is significant. Because if you're coming up with an arbitrary deadline of like, okay, well, by, January 2nd, I'm going to have this done. Okay, why by January 2nd? I like deadlines that mean something. By my birthday, so I can celebrate, or by my kid's birthday, so I can take them to Disney and I can really be thinking of nothing but them, or by the first day of school, so I can really dedicate myself to studying, knowing that I've done this, or by my mom's birthday, because I want to honor her life and she passed away. All of these things are great deadlines that are significant that you can give yourself, but make sure they're realistic, because if they're not, you're going to be burnt out and frustrated. Another thing that helps people to write faster is writing sprints. Writing sprints are awesome, especially when you're doing it scene by scene. Writing sprints, just putting that alarm on for 20 minutes, because it's overwhelming when you say, okay, I have to write for 2 hours today. That's crazy. But anyone can put the alarm on for 20 minutes and be like, okay, I got something done. Can I maybe afford another 20 minutes? And then you set that alarm again, and that time will go by so fast. Writing sprints are truly my secret weapon. And if you need more help with how to do writing sprints, I've done a lot of videos on this, but you can also call me up for a free call, and we'll be having some exercises in the upcoming From Idea to Publish in 6 Months course that are going to help you with those writing sprints to make them as productive as possible. Another secret weapon, of course, is outlining. I always recommend outlining, and some writers hate it so much, and I get that. That's fair. If you hate it, and if that's not your goal, great. Just know that if you don't have an outline, chances are that the writing process is going to be longer. You're going to have more editing to do, more tweaking to do. So just know that. I'm not saying that you have to do an outline, but I'm saying if you want to write faster or keep on track, that outline is going to be useful. Another tool that I use a lot is dictation. Dictation is an amazing tool when it comes to getting a lot of words down fast. And often I find that dictation can give your writing a real immediacy. You close your eyes, you envision that scene, and you're really seeing it. It's almost like watching a movie, and then you're telling your audience what you're seeing. And of course, the dictation is not going to be perfect. You're going to have a lot of editing to do. But again, it's all that mindset of having more words on the page and something to work with. I kind of love that. I use dictation a lot, not for every type of scene, mind you, but sometimes for like action scenes or description scenes, dictation works really, really well. Another thing I recommend is white noise or brown noise. Many of us who have ADHD or other types of processing or energy issues, we get distracted. And some people like to have maybe a playlist. For me, I cannot play music when I'm doing anything at all. I cannot concentrate at all. But I found this brown noise thing. If you look it up online, the brown noise, like what the noise on the airplane is, that's amazing. That helps me to just totally focus. And even a little sound machine or even white noise helps a lot. The time of day also helps for people trying to figure out how to build that schedule of writing often and getting momentum. If mornings aren't working for you, try evenings, or maybe try your lunch break, or maybe try sitting in your car and dictating. What works for you time of day wise, being able to figure out something that consistently works is definitely going to help you to actually get that momentum going. And it's going to be a boon for you when it comes to getting that book done in less time than you thought. But again, remember that no two writers are alike, and that what works for one is not going to work for the other. And remember that writing's a process, and so is publishing. So again, these are all things that take some time. And back in the day, keep in mind that a writer would write their book and then an editor and a publisher might have done the rest. So maybe that factors into less time spent. These days, writers are really responsible for doing so much more than before, I would say. So keep in mind that if you're falling behind because of tasks that you didn't realize you would have to do, that happens. So let's go through those tasks that you're going to need to do to write your book so that you make sure you're factoring all of these in and that you don't get frustrated, because there are times when you're doing everything you're supposed to do, but time is still going by, and that can get really frustrating. There are things where you can't cut a corner. So let's talk about the time it takes to do things. So number one, I would say when you get an idea, some people are going to do some research around it. Some people are going to do world building, things like that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think, researching characters, all of that is really, really fun. But you know what? There's a thing called researchitis. Some people spend so much time researching that they never get to the writing part. I know some writers who've been researching, especially for historical novels or things. They've been doing it for years and they're like, but of course, but I want to get it perfect. I can't possibly take a shortcut here. And I get it. That seems really painful. And again, it comes down to your goal. Do you want to write the most authentically, perfectly correct historical novel ever written? Okay, well then research for a longer time. Just know that, the history books aren't completely accurate either. So, be a little bit realistic about that. But maybe the research is more important to you. Maybe you are a world builder before you are a writer. Fair enough. But understand that you're taking some time and that the writing process is going to take longer. One of the things I recommend when people are stuck in this researchitis and doing the research on the background and the characters and all that, I'm like, you know what? Why don't you just get the story down first? And then you can go back and see which facts you need, which things you need to look up, which parts of this world are crucial for you to be describing. Pretty important. Okay, next step I would say is come up with a really good plot for your book. And this is where I would say you definitely want an outline in, but some people do well with just a story spine, right? Once upon a time there was, every day, blah, 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 until one day, blank. Because of that, blank. Because of this, blank. Until finally, blank. Ever since then, blank, right? That's the story spine. And many books follow some version of this. But of course, many books, like look at Gone Girl, they take that and they twist that spine around into some fancy yoga. So keep in mind that the more simple your plot, the less time it's going to take to create that outline or at least create that plot and write your book, right? The more points of view you have, the more complications you have, the more time it's going to take. And also, sometimes people think that complications are good. Some complications are not necessary. Some complications actually take away from your story. So be objective about that. So, okay, you've done your research and then you've done your plot, maybe your outline, and now you're going to do a rough draft. How long does that take? Well, Stephen King, under 3 months would be awesome. Sometimes it takes longer, right? And then you've got successive drafts after that, the second draft, and then maybe rewriting that. So this takes time, right? Some people do this in different ways. Some people rewrite everything. That takes longer. Some people go through it and change things. Any of those ways are fair, but it takes time. It's a process. And now you've got your beta readers or your editor or your story developer. This is a step that's going to take a while. Usually it takes beta readers at least a month to get back to you. Definitely put them on a deadline too, but you have to be realistic and respectful. Your beta readers are doing this for free. Your editor probably has a lot of other clients that they need to be juggling. So know that that's part of the process where you can't take a shortcut. You can't be like, no, you can do this in under X amount of time, because often they cannot. And then don't shortchange yourself when you get those comments back from your beta reader and your editor. You do not want to be skipping ahead and not addressing comments. Feel free to ignore some of the comments that don't feel authentic to what you're doing, but you definitely cannot be just ignoring comments left and right and skipping them and fast forwarding, because you're going to have some mistakes and you're going to feel that you missed out on writing the best book you could possibly write. So that's really important. Now, once we've gotten this perfect book down, we're going to need to do some formatting, whether we're self-publishing or trying to query agents. That's crucial, right? And the formatting doesn't take that long, but it needs to be done right. And then you've got either querying, which means you have to write a synopsis, you have to write a query letter, you need to research agents, or you've got the self-publishing process, which takes time to get that ISBN, to figure out how to upload everything, to get your book cover, which also takes time to get right. Think about all of those things and realize that some of the things that are going to trip you up can be totally avoided, like the researchitis, the self-editing nonstop as you're writing, the procrastination, the not being on goal and wandering around and switching plans. I know so many writers who switch their plans so many times. They're like, oh, I switched my story up. Oh, I switched my story up. Oh, I have a new outcome. Great, but why don't you write that into different books, right? So many people are working so long on their one book, as I said, that they never come out with another book because they're worrying about this book being perfect. They worry so much about being a good writer when honestly, I kind of feel, and this is just personal, that telling a good story to your ideal reader is so much more rewarding. But again, that's your choice. So Let me know if this helped you to see objectively how long it takes to write a book and what you can do to speed the process up, which things are non-negotiable in the whole book writing process. I hope I inspired you to just kind of start kicking butt and get that productivity and that momentum going so that your book comes out sooner rather than later. I look forward to hearing from you either on my website, or if you book a 15-minute call, or if you show up in writing group, or if you just post a question. All of those things are fabulous ways of letting me know that I'm on track answering the questions that you actually have. And I think today was a good one that I've heard so many times, but I'm always looking for new subjects for the How to Be an Author podcast, and I welcome your question. If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com.